Tonight on Primetime, leaders from across Europe and beyond gather in Yerevan for the European Political Community Summit. With security, Ukraine and stability in the South Caucasus high on the agenda. Calls to protect peace in the region. Good evening. The 8th European Political Community Summit has kicked off in Yerevan with more than 50 heads of state in attendance. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev joined via video link and highlighted efforts in the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. He also criticised some European institutions for what he called double standards in their position on peace.
Armenia hosts the 8th European Political Community Summit in its capital, Yerevan, on Monday, held under the motto Building the Future, Unity and Stability in Europe. The event has brought together nearly 50 heads of state and government officials. Discussions are focused on strengthening democratic resilience, developing connectivity, and enhancing economic and energy security. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev addressed the meeting via video link, highlighting progress made by Azerbaijan and Armenia following his meeting at the White House in August last year.
After the de facto peace was achieved, Azerbaijan unilaterally lifted all transit restrictions to Armenia imposed in the beginning of the 90s. Up to now, 28,000 tons of cargo to Armenia was delivered through the territory of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan went even further. We started to supply our oil products, gasoline and diesel, for the first time to Armenia, thus starting their trade relations. So far, 12,000 tons of our oil products have been exported to Armenia.
President Aliyev also noted the development of the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, adding that it will form part of the middle corridor connecting Asia to Europe. He also criticised the European Parliament and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe over their position on the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process.
On September 2023, Azerbaijan put an end to separatism in Karabakh. We ourselves implemented 4 UN Security Council resolutions adopted in 1993 and remained on paper for 30 years. 4 months after that, PASE imposed sanctions on our delegation. Unfortunately, double standards is today a kind of a modus operandi for PASE. Azerbaijan's territorial integrity has the same value that of any other country, and in this issue, double standards are unacceptable. Now about European Parliament. This gathering, instead of supporting the peace process, prefers to sabotage it. Since May 2021, 6 months after the end of the Second Karabakh War, until 30th April 2026, European Parliament adopted 14 resolutions full of insults, lies about Azerbaijan. Just imagine, 14 resolutions in 5 years, kind of an obsession.
In response, Azerbaijan's parliament on May 1st officially suspended cooperation with the European Parliament.
And we're joined now by our very own Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Orkan Amashov is with us. Orkan, always good to have you in the studio. Let's just start with this then. This offer by Azerbaijan to host a future EPC summit, it's an offer that had been accepted, that's right, isn't it?
The decision regarding this particular matter was made last year when the, I think, 6th summit of the EPC, European Political Community, was taking place in Tirana, Albania. Back then in May of 2025, a decision was taken regarding this EPC being held in Yerevan and the EPC in 2028, probably May as well, if memory serves me correctly, taking place in Baku. President Aliyev himself reflected on that very point during his address. He said that idea was suggested to him by EU Council President and Commission President Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen respectively, about Armenia hosting it in May 2026. And then he reacted to that particular proposal, saying that for the balanced approach we need to have one in Azerbaijan, which was accepted. And Azerbaijan and Armenia supported each other's candidacy regarding hosting EPC. It's a very good moment. Regarding why now in Armenia, I think there's a school of thought that idea was suggested back last year in order to support Prime Minister Pashinyan on the eve of the 7th of June elections, because a lot is happening in Armenia today. Yerevan dialogue is taking place as well, and some Azerbaijani colleagues of mine, including Rusif Husseinov from Topshubashov Center and Zaur Shirio from currently is in the Carnegie Endowment Center, are participating there. We have Azerbaijanis there in Yerevan, currently attending Yerevan dialogue. Today was the day of EPC 8 summit, and also today, bilateral first ever EU-Armenia summit is taking place. It will continue tomorrow. I think it could be said with a degree of certainty that all of these things happening in early May for a reason. EU wants to support Prime Minister Pashinyan. Azerbaijan is perfectly happy with this particular idea because Azerbaijan wants to sign a peace deal with Armenia. And after all, it's a bilateral matter between EU and Armenia fundamentally. I suppose, bearing in mind that this one is an 8th summit, so probably the next one, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th summit will take place in Azerbaijan in May 2028. It's a very good, of course, example, and many other things will take place as well. And we can discuss EPC-related matters further if you have any particular question related to the organization and to use the President Aliyev's word, modus operandi of that organization.
Well, something else that I did notice from President Aliyev's speech was that he spoke about peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia as a reality, a current reality, as opposed to something that we were working towards. How significant was that positioning statement, do you think?
As Prime Minister Pashinyan said during his speech there, it's the first time that President Aliyev is addressing the audience in Yerevan, albeit by means of video delivery, but still it's President Aliyev participated in that meeting in the 8th summit of the EPC. A peace is a reality in a sense that we have de facto peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Both leaders, President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan, have mentioned this on a number of occasions. We have de facto peace on the ground. Over the past 2 years, basically since, if memory serves me correctly, since February, March 2024, we have not had any single occasion of border violation between Azerbaijan and Armenia. As of 8th of August 2025, the peace treaty is initialed. It was initialed on that very date. Joint declaration was signed. Trip-route arrangement has been agreed upon. It was agreed back on that same date, on the 8th of August. We have de facto peace also because we have limited economic interaction, President Aliyev said. Basically, over the past few months, since October 2025, when Azerbaijan unilaterally lifted all the restrictions of transit of cargo to Armenia, there have been a number of examples of consignment. Azerbaijan acted as a third country, acting as a transit country for any product from Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan to, Russia to reach Armenia. And also Azerbaijan sent its own oil products, gasoline and diesel products to Armenia. So we have limited economic interaction. First Deputy Prime Minister of Azerbaijan, Mr. Shahid Mustafayev, was in Yerevan just a few days ago, meeting his Armenian counterpart, First Deputy Prime Minister of Armenia, Mikhail Grigoryan, and Armenian delegation was in Azerbaijan, in Gabala, just a few months ago for the same purpose, for the meeting of the Commission on Delimitation and Demarcation. I'm part of the Peace Bridge Initiative, receiving Armenian colleagues in Gabala. So, but we have some peace. We have de facto. First of all, peace should not mean basically lack of war only. Lack of war is a sort of primary condition, but we also need to have interaction of some sort, which we do have. And of course, these elections, which will take place in Armenia on the 7th of June, are incredibly, incredibly important. But President Ali mentioned a number of things. If you noticed a guy, he praised the council. He thanked particularly Mr. Antonio Costa. Yes. He expressed his satisfaction with the pragmatic part of relationship, but also criticized the European Parliament.
Yes.
And that's also something which deserves closer inspection and dissection, perhaps.
Yeah, and just on that, Orkan, these allegations surrounding Luis Moreno Ocampo, How do you think those allegations could be impacting these talks? Now, we know it's the council was represented, not the parliament.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, do you think it raises questions about neutrality, credibility of EU decision-making?
It's got these allegations revolving around the personality of the former ICC prosecutor, first ICC prosecutor as well, Luis Moreno Ocampo, are incredibly interesting, and one needs to examine them very carefully. They do give rise to certain concerns regarding impartiality, of course. If you look at that, examine that particular footage, at least one of them, the second sort of revelation there, to which, of course, Luis Moreno Ocampo has to reply. We have to go through it very carefully. But it gives rise to a very dangerous picture that European Parliament was and still is acting in line with a certain agenda, being influenced by third-party institutions of power against Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. And President Aliyev's remarks regarding European Parliament to the fact that since May 2021, this institution, which is official institution of European Union, has produced 14 resolutions condemning Azerbaijan, taking steps against the peace process, gives rise to certain concerns and makes one wonder why. Because basically, Azerbaijan and Armenia removed the subject of Karabakh from the peace negotiations. The text of the peace agreement was finalized in February 2025 and initialed in August 2025. We know, everybody who is privy to Azerbaijan and Armenian peace negotiations, that issue revolving around Karabakh, the fate of former Armenian residents of Karabakh, was one of the key stumbling blocks. And that has been removed. And now the European Parliament is calling on the reincorporation of this into the peace agenda. Azerbaijan officials evidently find that it could be connected with some sort of an agenda pursued by some malicious forces.
To disrupt the peace.
To disrupt the peace, basically. So you see this particular element coming from Luis Moreno Ocampo. And also, that particular footage reflects on their intentions regarding Prime Minister Pashinyan. That Prime Minister Pashinyan must be removed. Why to remove a Prime Minister of a country with a parliamentary system? Is it not a third-party interference against democracy? Is it not against the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia? Because we all know that Prime Minister Pashinyan described the upcoming elections as a choice between war and peace. And these people seem to be supporting the war party, if to follow Prime Minister Pashinyan's logic. So it's very interesting. President Aliyev drew distinction between European Union as an institution at large, Council, Antonio Costa, Ursula von der Leyen, and the European Parliament, which seems to be in a completely different camp. And also he criticized, of course, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which is not the institution of European Union. It's separate. It's a Council of Europe institution, but it's also part of the European institutional landscape, particularly bearing in mind that he was addressing EPC, which is the European Political Community. Talking about PASE was also a very reasonable thing to do.
Other leaders there too, 50 heads of state, including Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron. Of course, UK no longer part of the EU, but still part, obviously, of Europe, a key player. With leaders like that involved and being in Yerevan, do you sense an increasing interest in the South Caucasus amongst Western European actors?
I most certainly believe that. The fact that this EPC is taking place in Yerevan shows the relevance of the South Caucasus as a region to Europe. Of course, South Caucasus, the constituent member countries of that region, are not yet part of the European Union. It's highly unlikely they will be at any point soon, but they have, all of them, have their own individual agendas with the European Union. Armenia has got this strategic agenda adopted in December 2025. They're working on the visa-free the visa liberalization system arrangement with the European Union. Georgia was a candidate member country back in 2024. No longer does have that kind of status. Azerbaijan has got its own agenda with the European Union. Basically, the result of the Karabakh War, the current peace agenda between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and the fact that these two countries are actually on the verge of signing a peace deal, with elections coming up in Armenia being very relevant to that peace agenda, cumulatively makes this region very relevant to the European policymakers. And also, of course, this region is sandwiched between Iran and Russia, and of course risks associated with Iran, are making this region even more vulnerable perhaps in many ways, but also very valuable in terms of producing a sort of a protective layer sort of function. This region is incredibly important. If you want to, from the European policy makers' point of view, if you want to gain access to Central Asia and you want to avoid Iran and Russia, you're going to go through South Caucasus. There's no other options. Geography is sort of dictating the rules here. If you want to go through South Caucasus, you need to go through Azerbaijan, because Armenia on its own is not good enough. With Armenia, you will not be able to gain access to Caspian. You need Georgia, Azerbaijan together, or you need Armenia, Azerbaijan together. In any way, you always need Azerbaijan, whether you're going to go through Georgia or Armenia. So Azerbaijan is even more indispensable. Yes. And some of those leaders who are currently in the Armenian capital, they will be in Baku. I mean, we know that the foreign policy chief will be here. And it's very important for those European policymakers who are invested in the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process to show that, well, this EPC is taking place in Yerevan, but one of the next ones will be taking place in Baku. And this is not an EPC designed to support Armenia against Azerbaijan. It is an EPC designed to support Armenia in terms of its self-sufficiency, in terms of its so-called European approach and pivot towards Europe, but also simultaneously it supports Armenia in conjunction with Azerbaijan's national interest. It's absolutely vital. Of course, there may be some question marks regarding some of the steps taken by EU regarding Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process in the past, but currently we have found ourselves in the light of within the system where you have element of juxtaposition of some sort, and within that juxtaposition you have Azerbaijan, Armenia, European Union, and United States on one side, and Russia supported elements inside Armenia. Interestingly enough, some elements of European Parliament and some elements connected with figures like Luis Morena Campa, if this allegation proved to be true, which we need to see through, of course, on the other side. So this allegation that emerged is very relevant, not just in the context of President Aliyev's address to this EPC, where he criticized European Parliament, but I think that President Aliyev's criticism regarding European Parliament should also be understood in the context of these allegations, because Luis Morena Campo, in that footage, says that I've got a sharp guy on my payroll, he works for certain foreign policy chief there, Mr. Borrell, and I can actually influence European Union's policy by means of my people inside the European Parliament. This creates a very interesting picture. Allow me to add one more point. It's very fascinating. We talk about Russian hybrid threat, and this is the key part of the mandate of the EU partnership mission, which is currently operating in Armenia. I'm not entirely sure that what we call Russian hybrid threat in terms of its content is only limited to elements inside Armenia and Russia. There could be some non-Russian European-based or American-based elements inside that threat if you're looking at it from the point of view of jurisdictional content.
And do you think, Orkan, that there's something particular about the European Parliament as distinct from the other EU institutions that makes it, in a sense, potentially more vulnerable to things like that, or more attractive to those that may want to?
Probably makes it more attractive. If you're a Russian foreign policy maker, if you work for Russian intelligence and you want to influence European foreign policy or create an impression of some sort, going through the European Parliament channels might be useful, because you work with MEPs, with certain groups. There are some Eurosceptics there. There are quite a number of Eurosceptics inside the European Parliament. And those people will be happy to cooperate with Russia. In matters related to Ukraine, for example, they would be equally happy to cooperate with Russia in relation to matters like Armenia, for example. So it's a very interesting picture inside the European Parliament, which should be the sort of legislature of European Union. You do have anti-European elements, happy to cooperate with anti-European forces, including Russia, in such a way that could damage interests of Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's fascinating. You never know.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Let's talk about the forum itself. This is the 8th EPC.
Yeah.
Give us your evaluation of the forum, and we know Azerbaijan will be hosting one of the future events. How important is it? What role can it play in the future of this connection between Europe and this region?
I think if you look at Europe from the perspective of global powerhouse, if you want to gauge extent to which Europe could grow geopolitically and economically, South Caucasus is one of the areas you see the huge potentiality. I think Antonio Costa, during his delivery, talked about Europe's strategic depth being increased as a result of Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. So, and also we know the EU Commissioner Marta Koz talked about quadrilateral format involving Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, and also, of course, European Union itself. We had Turkish Vice President present there. So basically, from the perspective of Azerbaijan, although Azerbaijan does not have any ambition to join European Union anytime soon, it's also naturally interested in the increase of European influence in this region, as long as that increase aligns with Azerbaijan's own national interests. And to a large extent it does align, because Azerbaijan plays an important role in making Europe less reliant on any one particular source of energy. Azerbaijan provides sort of a support in the light of European Union decreasing its reliance on Russia and other sources. And also, Azerbaijan is a predictable actor. Azerbaijan is not letting its territory being used for any sort of geopolitical confrontation. Azerbaijan does something extraordinarily valuable, I think. Of course, there are certain limitations. What can Azerbaijan do? Azerbaijan cannot replace Russian natural gas supplies to Europe because Azerbaijan's resources are limited. Azerbaijan can play an important role, not just on its own, but by means of sort of doubling down on its geopolitical clout, by means of allowing Turkmen gas being exported via Azerbaijan to Europe, for example, so acting as a transit country, for example. But Azerbaijan's role has got its own peculiar characteristics. I think the result of Karabakh War is absolutely essential in terms of understanding what Azerbaijan did. Europe was limited in this geography because of Azerbaijan-Armenian conflict. Europe would have acted either on the side of Armenia, supporting Armenia against Azerbaijan, or letting these two countries remain wallowing in the quagmire of their own making. But what happened? Azerbaijan removed this Karabakh conflict issue out of the equation, created a new reality. Armenia agreed with this reality. This reality decreased Russian influence and provided new opportunities for European Union to enter. So Azerbaijan-Armenian peace benefits EU in this region. It benefits United States, and Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity is a very good example of that benefit. It to a certain extent limits Russia, but that's not the source of concern for European policymakers. And it's not a very good development, perhaps for Iran, if they look at it from the perspective of their own influence in Armenia. But ultimately, everybody will be able to benefit. As long as Azerbaijan's particular role here is concerned, this EPC format emerged back in the summer of 2022, immediately after the beginning of the war in Ukraine. President Macron played an important role in the institutional creation of this sort of body. The basic idea back then was that European Union on its own is not big enough as a political institution. You need to have something perhaps slightly ceremonial, but something containing countries like Britain, South countries of this region, and even, I'm sure, at that very stage there was an idea of involving countries, non-European countries like Canada, and we know that in this particular forum, Canada is present. And ultimately, Azerbaijan was present from day one. First summit resulted in Azerbaijan and Armenia recognizing each other's territorial integrity. The famous 6th of October Prague Declaration was signed during the first summit in the presence of, with the participation of President of the European Council, Mr. Michel, and French President Emmanuel Macron. But EU leadership was absolutely vital. And today's peace agenda and the result emanates from that particular agreement, of course. So Azerbaijan provides three fundamental elements for this union. First of all, geographical expanse, access to Central Asia. So, I mean, Europeans may not be particularly fascinated with the geographical size of Azerbaijan and Armenia together, but they would value this region because as a territory which provides access to Central Asia,
yes,
energy security, and the wider geopolitical clout. Three fundamental things.
Well, Ken, always a pleasure to have you with us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, Uzbekistan unveils major economic and regional initiatives as global leaders gather in Samarkand for the Asian Development Bank's annual meeting. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Uzbekistan has outlined major new economic and regional initiatives as global leaders gather in Samarkand for the Asian Development Bank's annual meeting. Our correspondent in Samarkand brings us more.
Uzbekistan has presented a series of large-scale development initiatives at the 59th annual meeting of the Asian Development Bank in Samarkand, focusing on digital transformation, green energy and regional connectivity. Speaking at the opening session, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev highlighted the country's economic progress, noting that since 2016, Uzbekistan has attracted more than $150 billion in foreign investment, while its economy has nearly tripled to $147 billion, with plans to grow the economy to over $240 billion by 2030. A key focus of the address was future-oriented development, including the launch of more than 200 artificial intelligence projects and plans to establish a regional AI hub, alongside expanding digital infrastructure and training programs. Additionally, Uzbekistan aims to increase the share of renewable energy to 54% by 2030, building on existing wind and solar projects. Regional cooperation was another priority, with proposals to strengthen transport and logistics links, including the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway, expected to reduce delivery times and significantly boost trade capacity. In addition, Uzbekistan announced its intention to join new international initiatives on critical minerals and digital connectivity, as well as proposing regional projects such as the Central Asia Green Belt and the Unified Tourism Road. ADB President Masato Kanda emphasized the need for deeper regional integration, noting that in today's fragmented global environment, coordinated cross-border solutions are essential to ensure stable and inclusive growth. The country also reaffirmed the strategic partnership with the Asian Development Bank, with a total project portfolio of nearly $16 billion, alongside a new cooperation program worth $12.5 billion through 2030. It is Cyril Rajab reporting from Samarkand, Uzbekistan A News.
Well, to help us understand what all of this means, we're joined from Almaty, Kazakhstan by Nubulat Nushenbayev, Professor at Tehran University. Professor, very good indeed to have you with us on the show tonight. Billions, huge numbers, billions then to be invested across sectors like infrastructure, climate resilience, digital transformation. What criteria will guide this allocation?
Thank you so much. First of all, billions of investments, the criteria should be the transparency, first of all, because we still remember how the transparency was under criticized over the decades, but now we see the situation is better. So the first thing is transparency, the second is institutions. So liberal institutions, they should be responsible to work, also to make possible all those long-term planned strategic investments for the region. So the main purpose is the implementation of the promised projects for the near and for long term, in particular for Central Asian countries. So numerous issues still face Central Asian countries when it comes to implementing foreign direct investments and making it sustainable. The second issue surely is interregional problems related with the climate change. So the ADP's promised investments, in particular to logistics, to infrastructure, to many others, I see this step should be considered in a systematic ways, because connectivity is no more infrastructure, it's a systemic issues, systemic vision for the long term. So therefore, in this 59th meeting of Asian Development Bank in Samarkand, I think it gives more responsibilities and more visionary steps. It requires steps from the Central Asian leaderships in order to have sustainable relations. Because as far as I know, ADP steps coming to Central Asia is trying to connect Central and the rest of the Asian countries in logistics, in AIs, and in innovative technologies for the long term.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point you make. The headline numbers sound very attractive, but actually spending this money in a responsible and transparent way isn't quite as easy as it might seem, is it? How will recipient countries, do you think, balance access to large-scale development financing with concerns about debt sustainability, fiscal stability, things like that?
Exactly, that's a very important point. If you compare the investments from ADBs and from Chinese companies and from the Western companies, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, the amount of Western investment pretty decreased in Central Asia. But the recipient countries, they should take some lessons from African and from other countries in order to not to overspend for the project which doesn't give long-term profits. So therefore, in this time, I think ADB countries are doing pretty well calculation to what extent those investments will be profitable and returns back in other ways, in other forms. So therefore, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, most of the Central Asian countries, 5 Central Asian countries, I think they learned some lessons how to work with the foreign direct investments, in particular from international organizations and from specific countries. So in the case of Tajikistan, I can say the Chinese investment since 2010, it definitely changed it now, even impacting to its foreign policy. So therefore, for long term, so Asian developments, investments, it's not only economic help from the outside, but it as well as it needs to be calculated from the inner to the outside. So local governments, they should give the right priorities, which sphere and how and to what extent this sphere are trustworthy. The first thing is because Central Asian countries, according to the Transparency International Group, they face hugely bureaucratic problems as well as corruptions ratings. So therefore, all these bureaucratic problems and obstacles, they should be removed. In that regard, those foreign direct investment from the ADBs and many other countries will give subsequent efficiency for the short term at least. However, we have seen some critics from the several institutions when it comes to the Central Asian countries. Still, we face some problems when it comes to the responsibilities, when it comes to the transparency issues again. But as far as I know, the ADB decided Central Asia is becoming region to connect Europe and Asia in these geopolitical turbulent periods. So therefore, I think they have some potential. Definitely, it will be up to the leadership how to see this is historical moment for the development of the region.
Yeah, as you say, some critics, some problems, but Central Asia has never been more in the spotlight, has it? That when at the moment, when it comes to connecting East with West. In what ways do you think this initiative might support regional connectivity projects, and how do you think it could influence trade and real economic integration across the region?
Well, this is very interesting question, Sean, actually, because Central Asia truly, it has never been at the spotlight if we compare since its independence period, not going far away. But the situation in Middle East and the situation in Ukraine and in many other parts, making Central Asia again as a center of the world, let's say, or like mainland. So therefore, the role of the ADBs is trying to risk to what extent this region has potential and how they may use this historical chance for the long term. So definitely the number one direction, I would say, that's the logistics. Because now if we look at the map, Central Asian countries, so all the 5 Central Asian countries, they have almost had transferred the first presidents. Now they see some common vision. At least Central Asian countries among themselves, they have solved all the issues. They have some common vision when it comes to the logistics, when it comes to the connectivity issues. So therefore, not only ADBs, but China, the European Union, and the other actors, they are trying to put their attention, political economic attention for the long term. I think the first reason is, of course, is connectivity issues, because the world is looking to connect the Europe and Asia from various spots. in particular with the help of the middle corridor aspects. So in this regard, when it comes to the connectivity issues, definitely Central Asian countries, they are trying to keep multilateral and a balanced political system, and not as well, but balanced economic and trade relations. So therefore, the influence of ADBs to Uzbekistan now, it's not only Uzbekistan and ADB, but to the whole at regional level, gives some new boots for the, at least to the next decade, for the longevities, for the connectivity issues, definitely. But again, it's up to the local governors how to prevent, how to implement those issues. I hope they don't do the same mistakes again, comparing with the last 10 years. So therefore, Central Asian countries now have common vision for the logistics, but definitely it depends on the other several issues, how other actors accept these steps. But anyhow, Central Asia, I think they should take this opportunity for their own interest, at least, to make this region attractive and trustworthy for the investors. And definitely, it's stable for the other political partners.
Yes, and as you say, the governments, multilateral organisations can create that platform of stability, the beginnings of that opportunity. But the private sector too needs to play its part, doesn't it? It needs to pick up that mantle and actually help drive that proper, sustainable economic growth that you spoke about.
Exactly. Without the help of private sector, we can't create sustainable development, surely, because we have seen how the Asian tigers at the late of 19th, Singapore, Taiwan, they made kind of economic steps. But Central Asian countries, definitely, they should bring private sectors, in particular, the big tech corporations. Already, Uzbekistan is doing a great job making for the private companies and the private tech groups kind of tax freeze, creating some comfortable conditions for the 5 to 10 years. Kazakhstan as well, trying to bring all those private sectors. So when the private companies, they trust, they come, definitely it will create such a kind of spiral reactions. They bring other companies as well. But we shouldn't forget about what happened in 2022. When Russia started a war to Ukraine, most of the European and Western companies from Russia, they started to migrate some of the offices to Kazakhstan, some of them to Uzbekistan. Now, when the Iran and the Middle East get destabilized, Central Asian countries, they are calling for all those companies, private sectors, to come to Central Asia. So in this regard, I don't see any kind of competition between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, but they see from the wider regional aspects how to make this region attractive, because the Middle East conflict also it changed the markets in this field. So therefore now from the world map we see Central Asia has a chance. But anyhow, I think having stable government, also some reforms, is not enough to create private sectors in order to make this region sustainably peace and cozy and easier to run their business for the private partnership. But it needs the local companies as well to work with them to integrate, having kind of common ecosystems. So for short, I would say Central Asia is trying to create common regional ecosystem for the big techs and the private sectors. So all others investment projects, definitely they need a whole ecosystem implement their own projects. Otherwise, it will not work properly as expected. So therefore, definitely it needs multilateral actions from the various fields. Also, definitely without the help of the private sector and active economic sustainable population and with the right mindset governors, impossible to implement all the projects as it planned.
Professor, always good to get your analysis. Thank you very much for joining us on Primetime.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, after the break, Ukraine steps up strikes on Russian energy targets as drone attacks intensify. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Ukraine says it has struck Russian energy targets, including 2 Shadow Fleet tankers near the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. Well, the attacks are part of an escalating drone campaign, with both sides launching hundreds of drones at each other on a near daily basis. In Russia's northwest, officials say dozens of Ukrainian drones targeted the major export hub of Primorsk, sparking a fire that was later contained. Well, authorities say no oil spill was reported and more than 60 drones were intercepted. Kyiv has intensified strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure in recent months, aiming to disrupt fuel supplies and weaken the war effort. Well, joining us now is Lieutenant General Marco Serrona, who is closely tracking military developments in the region. General, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Primetime. It's very good indeed to see you there. From an operational standpoint then, how significant is Ukraine's targeting of Russia's energy infrastructure at this time?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me today. Let's see. The strong effect is really strategical, not so much operational. Nevertheless, it's important under the operational point of view because these attacks in the energy infrastructure somehow erodes the logistic capability for the Russians to provide fuel to the front line. That's the most sensitive issue. But the most important, I suppose, is the strategic impact because a lot of these attacks to energy infrastructures, ships, ports, depots, so things like that, it's very much degrading the capability to produce money. It's very strong attack in the Russian economy, because somehow Ukraine has realized that this war in the Persian Gulf that open a window to Russia to make more money, for sure, even with the lift of the sanctions by the United States. The only way to try to slow down this is attacking the infrastructure, especially the depots and the capability to put the oil in the ships and the Shadow Fleet, of course. That is the main point. It is more strategical than operational, but nevertheless, it's important from the both point of views, of course.
And General, from an intelligence perspective then, what does Ukraine's ability to strike targets like Primorsk tell us about its surveillance and targeting capabilities?
Let's see. Of course, we know that Ukraine has a lot of support from the allies, from the European allies, even from the United States in the intelligence domain. So it's important and even Ukraine has a lot of capabilities also to monitor all the important infrastructures. Could be the ports, could be the factories, could be factories of armaments and their bases, of course. So they have a strong capability to monitor the activities on those areas, and after that confirm that the targets are there, are able to be attacked, and of course they have the capability to, with the drones and the missiles, ballistic missiles, but especially cruise missiles, to attack all of that infrastructure, even so far away as Primorsk in the Baltic Sea. So it's something that it's not the first time that Ukraine has been able to target bases more than 2,000 kilometers away, far away. So they have the capability to do that especially with drones, but also with cruise missiles.
And how worried do you think Moscow will be? I mean, Russia's energy export hubs, the Shadow Fleet tankers, how valuable, how critical are they to Moscow?
Yeah, a critical, at least in my view, into areas. One is that the lack of fuel, of gasoline, that is people normal Russians in the gas stations are feeling that some of them are close, and the prices are very high. So it's one of the areas where this is important is somehow affecting the morale of the Russians that live in the cities in Moscow and other places where the gas is not so the gasoline is not so in quantities in the gas stations, and in the prices are being very high. That's one of the points. The other point is targeting the capabilities of Russia exporting the oil and gas and derivatives of oil, fuels and gasolines and so on. So because it's from we know that a strong portion of the Russian economy, it's not only with this war, it was in the past, is built in the capability to export oil and gas. So if Ukraine is able to destroy or to erode, to degrade some of that capability, is directly affecting the capacity of Russia to support the war effort. So it's something that is both things are very much linked. And of course, Ukraine is not doing is not attacking the electric grid and the electrical generation capability of the Russians, but sometimes did it, and that also affect of course the morale of the populations where they experience lack of energy, something that the Ukrainians are used to, and so somehow it's to pay back the similar thing to the Russian population. But it's more linked to the capability to the economy, somehow to degrade the economic capacity of Russia to support the war effort in buying things or producing materials, equipment, defense equipment.
And you mentioned capacity there, economic capacity. When you look at the scale and the frequency of these exchanges more recently, what is your analysis of both sides' defense capacity at the moment?
What we can see in the last couple of months, it's that Ukraine has upgraded their capability to intercept drones and missiles. In the last months, the figures are about 90% of drones and missiles have been intercepted by the air defense and anti-ballistic missiles capabilities of the Ukrainians. Something different is happening in Russia because the air defense of Russia are not in good shape. That is something that is clear, because almost the capability to destroy drones and missiles by the Russians it's very low. It's very low. We have seen that they are not able to intercept. Of course, the Ukrainians are using a kind of swarm of drones, of course, as the Russians did. Does also to the Russia does also to the Ukrainians, but we are seeing a difficulty for the Russians to intercept the drones and the cruise missiles of the Ukraine, and so of course the Russia has another problem because it's a huge territory, difficult to have air defense everywhere. So it's something that Russia was not expecting in this field. After the development of capabilities in drones and long-range drones and cruise missiles by the Ukrainians, Russia has experienced in the last months a lot of difficulty to intercept it, to defend their own bases, air bases, and lots of destruction by the Ukraine.
And what do we expect then in terms of a response from Moscow? Do you think there'll be fast additional investment in that area, or will they adapt in some other way?
Let's see. We are not experiencing anymore in the last, last year, more or less, especially after the end with the war in the Middle East and the standby of the talks. So the Russians are not anymore doing what they did in the past. When the talks begin, they did some punitive attacks with drones and with missiles. Now it's something stable. So it's drones and missiles from Ukraine to Russia, drones and missiles from Russia to Ukraine. So the only difference is that the Russians are attacking much more energy infrastructure and civilian targets. So as we seen in last night, that's so more of that. So and the Ukrainians are targeting and attacking more military infrastructure, air bases, factories, military factories that produce defense materials and equipments. And of course the energy infrastructure, ports, ships, tankers, shadow fleet, depots of fuel and oil. So more link to the economic capability. But we have not seen we are not seeing in the last months some increase in the Russian part, somehow to trying to punish the capabilities of course the Russians are targeting also some of the places they realize that the Ukrainians are producing the drones and the missiles, of course. But as we know, the Ukrainian infrastructure of production of drones, it's dispersed, so it's not something that. As the Russians, at contrary, they have huge factories, so it's more easy for the Ukrainians to attack that.
General, we appreciate your analysis very much indeed. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Okay, after the break, the UK moves closer to the EU on defence support for Ukraine with a major new package and fresh sanctions on Russia. Don't go away. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Now, more on the war in Ukraine, and Britain is moving closer to the European Union on defence support for Kyiv as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrives in Yerevan for the European Political Community Summit. Now, the package is worth $106 billion and is aimed at helping to cover Ukraine's needs for 2 years. Most of the money is expected to go toward military spending. London says the move could also help British defence firms supply Ukraine. Well, the UK Prime Minister is also set to announce new sanctions on Russian companies linked to military supply chains. Well, joining us now is Scott Lucas, political analyst from Wicklow in Ireland. Scott, great to have you back on Primetime. What's your assessment of this then? How significant is this shift from the UK towards European EU defence coordination?
Well, I think we have both a specific significance with respect to Ukraine and then this wider significance that you're talking about. I mean, the specific significance is that it isn't just simply an EU 90 billion euro loan that's being provided to help Ukraine through 2027. The UK, by providing assistance with the administrative cost of the loan, which are estimated at about 3 billion euros per year, they now have, as it were, a buy-in in terms of that support for Ukraine's security. And we've seen that, to be honest with you, for years, despite the Brexit moment, as it were, that the UK and Europe have been aligned in this defense of Kyiv. But I think this broader impact is important, and that is what you've had is the European Union has made this commitment to 800 billion euros of investment in production in the defense sector over the next 5 years. Now you have the UK making its own commitments in terms of technology and production. Again, some of this is linked to Ukraine. Just a couple of weeks ago, the UK announced a £3 billion package for 120,000 drones. But what you're talking about here is that in the area of security and defense cooperation, you don't have that Brexit split. You don't have it that here's the UK out here and here's Europe out here at a distance at a key moment for both of them because of the unpredictability and even the argument that the Trump administration is no longer committed to alliance with Europe or indeed with the UK.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Scott, to us, and I'm sure to many viewers watching, 90, 100 billion sounds like an enormous amount of money. But what material difference do you think it will make to Ukraine's battlefield and also their long-term defense needs?
Oh, I think this is one of the key moments. And, in what is now the 5th year of the invasion, it's one of the key moments since Russia failed to conquer Ukraine in February 2022. First of all, that 90 billion euros is estimated to cover 2/3 of it for military expenditure, 1/3 for the finances of the government to safeguard Kyiv until 2027. Without it, you would have had the prospect that Ukraine simply could not keep itself going because of the blockade within the EU by the Kremlin's ally, Viktor Orban of Hungary. But beyond this, as you heard from your previous guest, this comes at a moment when Ukraine is moving from resistance to strength. It's not just holding out against Russia, although it is doing that. It is counterattacking inside Russia. So we have had, and you covered in your discussions, the impact on Russia's oil refineries, on its ports, on its terminals. So we're no longer talking about Ukraine trying to make it through a winter before the energy infrastructure is broken. We're no longer talking about whether Ukraine's civilian resistance will survive. We're actually asking, what are the constraints on Russia that are taking place? And I think if you had asked me this question a year ago, Guy, I would have said this could be game over for Ukraine because of the Trump administration cutting all American assistance. Now it isn't game over for Ukraine. The game is very much on, and not only surviving, but getting better conditions in any settlement when Vladimir Putin decides to give up the invasion.
And Scott, what about the UK? I mean, what do you make of, critics of Keir Starmer, will, particularly on the right of politics, have long said, he's always been looking for an opportunity to reverse Brexit. Do you sense deeper post-Brexit alignment between the UK on the EU on things like security?
Well, first of all, let's just cut through the white noise. Keir Starmer is not going to reverse Brexit because Keir Starmer said at the outset of his prime minister, when he became prime minister, he said, we're not even going to rejoin the single market. I'm not going to take us there. But what you have is a practical effect, which is to mitigate the damage of Brexit. And I'm speaking to the right in Britain. Brexit has been incredibly damaging to the country where I used to live, that you're seeing in individual sectors, the UK begin to make links with and begin to make agreements with the EU. Some of these are economic sectors with specific agreements. Some of them are non-economic, but extremely important. For example, the Erasmus program for educational exchange. So it's this idea that the UK and EU are politically apart because of Brexit. They have had this forced economic separation, but that you do not have to be completely divorced from each other. And I think as the UK faces, a very serious economic moment, any restoration of links with Europe is going to be a positive at this time.
And what about these sanctions, the new UK sanctions on Russia? Do you think that will hurt Moscow?
It constrains Moscow. The problem with sanctions, and this was deliberately misrepresented by Kremlin supporters, was always that sanctions were going to collapse Russia and that the war effort would be over just like that. That was never what sanctions were trying to do. They were trying to constrain Russia's invasion, to limit the resources that could be given to it. And to that extent, the sanctions have succeeded. They have put pressure on the Russian economy, again, as your previous guest was talking about. They have forced the Russian government to put more and more money to the military while sacrificing on social spending, while increasing the government deficit, while, in a sense, having to go back to the Russian people and say, just give us a little more time. So I think the sanctions are part of this wider package that we've talked about, which is constraining Russia, but showing support for Kyiv.
And politicians are usually a little nervous about talking about this sort of thing, but we have seen somewhat of a boom across Europe when it comes to defence recently. Do you think there could be some benefits to the British defence industry, as Keir Starmer alluded to?
Oh, there's no doubt that this is part of the reason why the UK is coming in on this 90 billion euro loan, and that is that if you come in on the loan and help finance the administrative cost, then your firms can be amongst those who are supplying equipment, who are supplying weapons, who are supplying other forms, other items that Ukraine needs. So yes, the overall European investment in defense is going to benefit a lot of European industries. And if the UK can be linked to that European effort, there will be a benefit for Britain as well.
Finally, Scott, Europe, the EU has been criticised at times during this conflict for being sort of all talk and no action. But do you sense you're starting to see a joined up, a coherent strategy now across Europe?
Well, I mean, first of all, since 2022, and the EU has moved too slowly at times. It's been hindered at times, for example, by Hungary under Viktor Orban, but the EU has moved. Europe has been by far the largest provider of financial and military aid to Ukraine, far exceeding that provided by the United States. Europe has been the primary diplomatic and political supporter of Ukraine when it's been under pressure, not only from the Kremlin, but from Washington to give up more territory. So yes, I think you're seeing Europe step up when it comes to Ukraine, but more importantly, I think Europe is now at a moment where it's stepping up for itself. I think if you listen carefully to politicians, Ursula von der Leyen at the EU, but also Friedrich Merz in Germany, Emmanuel Macron in France, Alexander Stubb in Finland, this is a hinge moment in history. Europe can no longer simply look to Washington in terms of security. It has to be able to provide this on its own, and it's on the way to doing that.
Professor Scott Lucas, always good to speak to you. Thank you for your analysis tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories shaping the day with Andy Mioch. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime now. Andy Mioch is with us, bringing you the business news stories of the day. Andy, what's on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, a major offshore gas project in Romania has entered a new phase. Spirit Airlines shut down, opened some room for its competitors, and GameStop launched a bid to buy eBay. So let's have a look. First up, pipe-laying work has begun on Romania's biggest Black Sea offshore gas project. First gas from the Neptune Deep project is expected in 2027, with an estimated annual production of around 8 billion cubic meters of natural gas.
Brent crude oil futures rose as much as 5% to hit a new four-year high before paring some gains to trade around $110 per barrel on Monday. This follows reports that 2 missiles struck a US warship after it ignored Iranian warnings, though the US military denied the strike. The IRGC Navy also released a new map designating areas of the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian military control. It said the zone spans key stretches between Iranian and UAE coastlines and warned it may act against vessels that violate its rules, heightening fears over shipping security. On Sunday, Donald Trump said that the US would try to free cargo ships stranded by the Strait of Hormuz closure since the start of the Iran war. Meanwhile, OPEC Plus agreed to increase output by 188,000 barrels per day at its first meeting since the UAE's exit.
Well, we have just seen an update on oil prices before the latest news that came in less than an hour ago. Currently, Brent crude oil futures are trading at around $113 per barrel. In the world of aviation, following the shutdown of Spirit Airlines over the weekend, shares of competitors are up. The bankrupt carrier Spirit ceased operations on Saturday after failing to secure backing for a U.S. government bailout plan.
Shares of Frontier Airlines and JetBlue Airways rose in pre-market trading on Monday after rival Spirit Airlines shut shop, fueling hopes the carriers can capture market share, control prices and absorb displaced passengers. JetBlue shares were up about 5%, while Frontier gained 4%. The bankrupt carrier Spirit ceased operations on Saturday, becoming the industry's first casualty tied to the Iran war, after failing to win creditor backing for a US government bailout plan. Spirit cancelled all flights and began a structured wind-down, ending a 34-year run built on a no-frills model that lost appeal after the pandemic as more travellers opted for comfort. Its exit could give rivals room to gain market share while easing the fare wars that have squeezed margins across the US airline industry, particularly in leisure-heavy markets such as Florida.
Next up, US video games retailer GameStop has offered to buy eBay for $55.5 billion in an unsolicited bid that its boss warned could turn hostile if the proposal is rejected by eBay's board. GameStop said it was willing to pay $125 a share, split 50-50 between cash and stock.
GameStop wants to buy eBay. The retailer said Sunday that it has offered to buy all common shares of the online marketplace for about $56 billion. Chief Executive Ryan Cohen said the offer price is $125 a share in a 50-50 mix of cash and stock. The bid represents a premium of about 20% based on eBay's Friday close. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Cohen said that the move would create huge opportunities to improve earnings and cut costs. He added that the combination could be a legit competitor to Amazon. If eBay is not receptive, Cohen said he was prepared to run a proxy fight and take the offer directly to shareholders. He added that he has secured a commitment letter from TD Bank for about $20 billion in debt financing. The proposal comes as GameStop grapples with disruptions from a shift toward online shopping and digital purchases. According to Reuters calculations, the company has a market value of almost $12 billion compared to $46 billion for eBay. That means the potential deal would upend the usual merger and acquisition playbook, as it's rare for a public company to target one nearly 4 times its size.
Well, as promised, here's the Romania story. Pipelaying work has begun on the country's biggest Black Sea offshore gas project. First gas from the Neptune Deep project is expected in 2027, with an estimated annual production of around 8 billion cubic meters of natural gas.
Work has begun to lay pipelines for Romania's Neptune Deep Black Sea gas project. It's one of EU's most significant energy deposits, with an estimated 100 billion cubic meters of recoverable gas. Once it starts producing gas in 2027, Neptune Deep will double Romania's gas production and likely turn it into a net exporter at a time when the EU is weaning itself off Russian gas. It will also supply Germany and Moldova, with other European countries like Slovakia also showing interest. The project is a joint venture between OMV Petrom, majority controlled by Austria's OMV, and Romania's state-owned Romgaz. 2 ships, owned by Italy's Saipem, will lay 160 kilometers of pipeline from offshore wells to land, where works on a gas metering plant are in full swing. OMV Petrom said laying the pipeline will last 2 months, while the plant will be finalized by summer. The company has 6 deep water wells left to dig. Parts of the production platform are being built in Indonesia and Italy and are scheduled to arrive in the Black Sea later this year.
In the biopharma industry, fresh talks between Samsung Biologics and its union broke down despite government mediation, raising the risk of a prolonged strike that has already caused losses of around $101 million. Negotiations are set to resume later this week.
Samsung Biologics estimated on Monday that a strike by its union over pay has cost the contract drug manufacturer about 150 billion won, or just under $102 million so far, marking the latest labor unrest to hit the South Korean conglomerate. The estimate reflected the financial impact from a partial disruption to overall line production the company said. A total of 2,861 employees, about half of the total workforce, have been striking since April 28th, according to the union's website. Management offered a 6.2% hike, according to the company. Management and union representatives are scheduled to hold another meeting on May 6th, followed by a joint session with mediators from the government 2 days later.
And finally, in robotics news, a Chinese unicorn, Linkerbot, is looking for a $6 billion valuation in its next financing round. Unlike competing humanoid makers that focus on training robotic hands for household chores, Linkerbot specializes in high-value human craftsmanship.
Chinese robotics startup Linkerbot, the global market leader in highly dexterous robotic hands for humanoids, will seek a $6 billion valuation in its next financing round, double the valuation in a just-closed funding, the company said. Beijing-based Linkerbot completed what it called a Series B+ funding round last week that valued it at $3 billion. It did not say when the next funding round will be launched or whether it was targeting the $6 billion valuation in a private investment round or in an initial public offering. Linkerbot currently holds over 80% of the global market share in high degree of freedom robotic hands and plans to scale production to 10,000 units a month from almost 5,000 currently, the company said. Unlike competing humanoid makers such as X-Square Robot that focus on training robotic hands for household chores, Linkerbot specializes in high-value human craftsmanship. The company said its goal is to replicate the entire library of human dexterous skills within its hardware, referring to the firm's Linker SkillNet platform. Linkerbot claims it's the world's largest real-world dexterous manipulation dataset containing over 500 skills so far.
And that'd be all in the business brief for tonight. Handing it back to you, Guy.
Amazing technology, Andy. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents all around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Now let's check in with our correspondents around the world. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Esmail Baghai has confirmed that Tehran has received the US counter-proposal to its 14-point plan via mediator Pakistan, which is being reviewed by the Iranian officials. Our correspondent Turaj Shirililo has more.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghai said it has been forwarded through Pakistan with answers of the United States to Tehran's proposals relayed last week to Washington. In an interview on the state-owned IRIB TV, he said that the U.S. counter-proposal is under review in Tehran, stressing that Iran's response to the U.S. non-point plan last week did not discuss the nuclear dispute at all. Iran has not revealed contents of its proposal, but according to the semi-official Tasnim and Fars news agencies affiliated to the Revolutionary Guards, it focuses on ending the war, not extending the ceasefire, and within 30 days instead of 2 months as suggested by the United States. They reported that guaranteeing non-aggression, withdrawing U.S. military forces from Iran's periphery, lifting the naval blockade, releasing Iran's frozen assets, paying compensation, lifting sanctions, ending the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, and a new mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz were in Iran's 14-point proposal. Over the weekend, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held phone calls with the foreign ministers of Brazil, Germany, Oman, and Spain on Sunday, and also held phone contacts with his French, Italian, Japanese, and South Korean counterparts on Saturday. The Iranian Foreign Ministry said Araghchi's talks focused on bilateral relations and the latest regional and international developments, during which he briefed them on Tehran's initiatives to end the Israel-US imposed war on Iran. It is believed that Iran's top diplomat shared with his counterparts the details of Tehran's 14-point counter-proposal exchanged via the mediator Pakistan. Turaj Shirililo from Tehran, Foreign News.
The UN has urged Afghanistan's authorities to release detained journalists and protect press freedom. Well, the call came on World Press Freedom Day amid warnings that Afghan media workers face censorship, intimidation and arrest. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis reports from Kabul.
Richard Bennett, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Afghanistan, says press freedom has sharply declined since the Taliban returned to power. He called for all detained journalists to be released immediately and unconditionally. Bennett said Afghan media workers face censorship, surveillance, harassment and legal restrictions, forcing many into self-censorship. He warned that reporting on sensitive issues, especially women's rights or criticism of the Taliban, can carry serious risks. Bennett also said women journalists face extra barriers, including movement restrictions, dress codes, and workplace discrimination. UNAMA also marked World Press Freedom Day by saying freedom of expression and support for journalism are key pillars of peace. Afghanistan's Ministry of Information and Culture says Afghan authorities supports the media but says outlet must work within religious, cultural and national values. A spokesperson said more than 140 new media outlets and institutions were granted licenses last year. The UK Special Representative for Afghanistan, Richard Lindsay, also marked the day by highlighting freedom of expression, saying Afghan reporters continue vital work in difficult circumstances. Bennett ended his statement by saying a free and independent press is not only a cornerstone of human rights, but indispensable for Afghanistan's future. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
And moving now to regional logistics, and Azerbaijan continues to facilitate vital transit operations. Today, the Bilajari station dispatched 10 wagons carrying 678 tons of fertilizer en route to Armenia, marking a significant step in the ongoing corridor linking Russia and the region. Leila Rahimli has more.
I'm reporting from the Bilajari station, where Azerbaijan Railways continues to facilitate key transit operations. While ago, 10 wagons loaded with 678 tons of fertilizer were officially dispatched from this station en route to Armenia, marking another step in the ongoing logistics corridor linking Russia to Armenia through Azerbaijani territory. To give you some context on the momentum here, this follows a major dispatch just yesterday when 8 wagons carrying 536 tons of fertilizer was sent from Bilajari toward the Büyükesik direction. When we look at the big picture, the numbers are quite substantial. To date, the transit volume moving through Azerbaijan includes over 25,000 tons of grain, nearly 2,000 tons of fertilizer and 68 tons of buckwheat. But that isn't all. Alongside this transit, Azerbaijan is also actively supplying essential energy resources. As it stands, direct exports from Azerbaijan to Armenia include over 8,500 tons of diesel, 979 tons of AI-92 and 2,955 tons of AI-95 premium gasoline. The logistics here at Bilajari are operating seamlessly as the cargo makes its way across the region. From the Bilajari station, this is the latest updates for now, and this is Leila Rahimli with Zainal Hassanov for A News.
Baku's main seaport is expanding its capacity, with new infrastructure now coming online to handle rising cargo volumes. Well, the latest upgrade is expected to improve efficiency and strengthen the port's role along key regional trade routes.
The Port of Baku is expanding its operational capacity as part of an ongoing modernization program. For the first time in its history, berth number 7, previously unused, has now been brought into active service. The newly commissioned berth is supported by a next-generation crane with a lifting capacity of 125 tons. The introduction of modern equipment and the activation of additional berth space come as cargo volumes along regional routes continue to grow, placing increasing pressure on port infrastructure. The development is also seen as strategically important for the Trans-Caspian international transport route, widely known as the Middle Corridor.
This step represents a significant move forward for us. By the end of the year, we aim to increase the port's container handling capacity from the current 150,000 TEU to 260,000 TEU. To achieve this, a systematic program of work is already underway. I should note that we have identified 4 key priority areas. One of these relates to the declining water level of the Caspian Sea. Based on the results of an international consortium tender, dredging works are planned to address this issue. At the same time, we are investing in modern technologies. This includes the acquisition of an additional Italian-made crane, which will allow for tandem operations. In addition, we plan to procure locomotives, forklift trucks, and container handling equipment. In total, 33 new units of machinery are expected to be acquired by the end of this year, extending into the early months of 2027.
With Berth 7 now operational, the Port of Baku is positioning itself to handle growing demand for more efficiently reinforcing its role as a key logistics hub connecting Europe and Asia. Ayten Şükürova, Zöhrab Shirinov, A News.
Well, as we heard earlier in the programme, the UK is preparing to join a multi-billion-pound European Union loan scheme to support Ukraine. The move comes as European leaders gather for a key summit in Armenia.
The United Kingdom has begun negotiations to join a major European Union loan scheme worth around £78 billion, aimed at supporting Ukraine. Prime Minister Keir Starmer discussed the move at the European Political Community Summit in Yerevan, Armenia, where dozens of European leaders have gathered. The loan package approved by EU leaders last month is intended to fund Ukraine's defense and wider financial needs over the next 2 years, with most of the money going directly to military support. The package had been blocked for months by former Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who opposed further aid to Kiev. But his removal from office last month cleared the way for the deal to move forward. Keir Starmer said participation would help ensure Ukraine receives the equipment it needs, while also allowing British defence companies to access future contracts. The announcement is being seen as another step towards closer cooperation between the UK and the EU, particularly on security and defence, despite Britain having left the bloc. On the sidelines of the summit, the Prime Minister also met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who thanked the UK for its continued support. Meanwhile, Downing Street says further sanctions targeting Russian companies are expected later this week to disrupt military supply chains. Zeina Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Kazakhstan is stepping up its ambitions in artificial intelligence, positioning itself as a regional hub for innovation and investment. At the GTEx Forum in Almaty, global tech leaders, investors and policymakers gathered to discuss how AI is transforming economies and where new opportunities are emerging. Our correspondent reports now from the scene.
I'm reporting from the site of the forum where global tech leaders, investors and policymakers are discussing how artificial intelligence is reshaping economies and what that means for this region. Kazakhstan is positioning itself as an active player in this transformation. Within the next 3 years, the country aims to become a fully digital state. This goal was outlined by President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev during a meeting of the AI Development Council held here in Almaty. And this exhibition reflects that ambition. The country's tech sector is already showing a rapid growth. Over the past 7 years, the ecosystem has expanded 18-fold, reaching $26 billion. More than 100 artificial intelligence projects are currently underway. And against this backdrop, experts say the region is entering a new phase. This phase is opening fresh directions for investment and partnerships.
All the things that are happening right now, not only in our region, but like in our closer regions, and especially in Gulf region, I think that's kind of a chance and opportunity window for Kazakhstan and Central Asia, and I think we have to work together with the Middle East, to found a new markets for venture capital, because before it was only focused on Silicon Valley, Southeast Asia, Europe, and I think this is new land-tapped markets and new opportunities to come. So I think we need to exploit, so to speak, quote unquote, the situation in order to make it mutually beneficial as for our region, for Kazakhstan and Middle East.
But attracting investment is only part of the equation. The next challenge is how to integrate artificial intelligence across the economy.
So the foundations are there, but now, of course, you need to boost that and make sure that the economy overall gets cognified, right, with artificial intelligence and with data. And that's the next step. So we need to design programs, strategies, initiatives that will diffuse AI through the entire real economy. In agro-industry, for instance, right? I mean, Kazakhstan is great that way. It can feed up to 400 million people. But also in mining, in resource processing, in logistics, right? Think of the corridor between East and West that now has a digital overlay, right? In space tech, Kazakhstan has a lot to offer in space tech. In energy, think about nuclear. And so we now need to diffuse AI into those sectors across the economy.
Almaty in this context is a natural choice. It remains the country's leading IT center. It's home to around a third of all tech companies and generates more than half of total IT services output. Organizers expect this forum to lead to concrete deals and new partnerships. More than 100 investors from 28 countries managing over $200 billion in assets have already signaled their readiness to expand funding for AI startups in the region. Pariza Kalimurzina, Natik Mamadov, A News, Almaty.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has met his Kuwaiti counterpart in Ankara at a time of growing concern over Gulf energy security and shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the visit comes amid reports that Kuwait exported no crude oil in April, underlining the pressure facing Gulf producers as regional tensions threaten global energy flows. Here are the details.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met his Kuwaiti counterpart, Sheikh Jarrah Jaber Al Ahmed Al Sabah, on Monday, in a visit that comes as Gulf energy security is again at the center of regional diplomacy. Held behind closed doors, the talks took place at the Turkish Foreign Ministry in Ankara. According to officials, discussions were likely to include bilateral relations and cooperation, along with regional developments, especially those pertaining to the Strait of Hormuz. In recent weeks, the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway used by major energy exporters, has become a critical flashpoint. For oil-rich Kuwait, the pressure is especially acute. Unlike some Gulf countries, Kuwait has fewer alternative routes for the shipment of crude oil. According to recent reports, Kuwait exported 0 barrels of crude oil in April, the first such month since the end of the 1991 Gulf War. That makes today's meeting in Ankara about more than routine bilateral diplomacy. Turkey and Kuwait maintain close political ties with cooperation spanning trade, investment, defense, energy, and humanitarian issues. But Ankara is also seeking closer coordination with Gulf partners as instability affects shipping energy prices and wider economic security. Pressure around Hormuz, combined with Kuwait's reported halt in crude exports, will surely add urgency to today's discussions in Ankara. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now, more on a topic we touched on at the top of the programme. New footage featuring the former prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Luis Moreno Ocampo, has emerged. In the video, Ocampo is allegedly discussing an artificial intelligence project linked to Armenia and the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. Well, the material claims the project expanded from academic research into broader use involving media, politics and international networks. Here's more.
Minval Politica has released a third set of footage it claims shows former International Criminal Court prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo discussing an artificial intelligence project linked to Armenia and Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. According to the outlet, Ocampo describes plans to build a platform using AI in cooperation with academics from the Brazilian University of São Paulo and specialists in physics and technology. He allegedly says the project uses advanced computing, including supercomputers, to model global political dynamics.
And the next step for me is see how can organize this in a platform to use artificial intelligence to do this properly. So I'm working with the South Paulo University, the physics department, on a project on artificial intelligence. Now I spend days in Spain with some friends of mine who are involved in this type of companies, really making how the Armenia project is a pilot of the company using artificial intelligence.
Si vamos a hablar de esto, es otra cosa que no quiero asustarte, pero yo hago muchas cosas. También soy profesor en la Universidad de San Pablo, en Brasil. Trabajo con un físico, con el departamento de física. Estamos usando la física moderna, que es básicamente la inteligencia artificial, para modelizarlo y tratar de organizar el orden global y el desorden global. Y entonces tenemos Brasil financia eso, tenemos supercomputadoras trabajando en eso. Y pusimos el foco al principio queríamos hacer orden global en general. Después dijimos, no, es muy complicado, hagamos genocidio. Y después dijimos, hagamos una gorra Karabaj, que yo tengo mucha información. Estamos sacando una gorra Karabaj. Ahora, yo veo que este producto académico es un producto académico. Yo tengo que sacar el jugo de yo. Estoy tratando de armar una compañía que básicamente es cross-border, que transforme la información que produzcamos acá, que llegue a los políticos que toman decisiones, que llegue a los decision makers, que eso es una técnica precisa, que llegue a los mainstream media, social media, para que sea masivo, deben que llegue a otros académicos para que solidifique.
Pero tú estás desarrollando un programa utilizando inteligencia artificial.
Sí.
Porque hay programas, hay think tanks que se juntan para aconsejar a la gente que toma decisiones y lo existe hace mucho tiempo. Pero
Minval Politica says the material suggests efforts to combine academic work, media outreach, and technology for political influence. It also repeats earlier claims about anti-Azerbaijan lobbying networks and funding links involving Armenian and Russian-Armenian figures. A News has not independently verified the footage or the allegations.
3 people have died following a suspected hantavirus outbreak on a cruise ship in the Atlantic, according to the World Health Organization. Well, 6 passengers have been affected, with 1 confirmed hantavirus case and another in intensive care in South Africa. The World Health Organization says it's containing evacuations and assessing risks for those still on board. The outbreak was reported on the MV Hondias, which was travelling in between Argentina and Cape Verde. 2 of the victims who died were Dutch nationals. Hantavirus is a rare virus and usually spread through contact with infected rodents. Malayan authorities have launched an investigation into coordinated attacks on army positions carried out last month. Well, a statement read on state television indicated that active and former soldiers may have been involved. Several arrests have already been made, while security forces continue to search for suspects who are still at large. The attacks targeted multiple locations, including areas near a key military base. In China, policing is getting a high-tech upgrade with new tools changing how officers interact with the public and respond to emergencies. This new innovation is drawing attention and helping its wider police force. Here's more.
Police in Guangzhou have introduced a range of smart technologies to enhance safety and public engagement during the May Day holiday period. Among the most eye-catching additions are humanoid robots, now accompanying officers on patrol in busy public areas. Dressed in police-style vests, the robots interact with the public and deliver anti-fraud messages, drawing attention and encouraging people to stay and listen.
With the robot on patrol, people are more likely to stop and engage with us, making them more receptive to anti-fraud advice.
Authorities say the approach is helping improve awareness and reduce vulnerability to scams. On the ground, officers are also using self-balancing scooters to move quickly through areas where vehicles are restricted, such as parks.
These scooters allow us to respond quickly. We carry emergency supplies so we can assist people on site if they are injured.
Drones are also being deployed to monitor crowds and traffic from above, providing real-time support to officers on the ground. Together, the technologies form a multi-layered policing system aimed at improving response times and strengthening public safety.
Well, that brings us to the end of Prime Time. Please do come back tomorrow where we'll have plenty more news and analysis for you. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.